couple of Sundays ago, we were at Silverstone with the MGB, which we'll tell you about later. But anyway, the main thing was that one of our followers was a really good bloke. He came up to me and he was dead straight, and he just looked at me and he said, "Right, what's going on?" He said, "Well, it's Ivan's shed, Ivan's barn. What's the problem?" So I had to tell him what the problem was, and I thought, well, if he's been wondering that, probably you're all wondering it as well. So anyway, this is what happened. Christian continued making Ivan's shed videos from young Fergus, who started the job. And obviously, I don't take a lot of interest in passwords and all that, so Christian set it all up, knowing everything, and I knew nothing. But anyway, so now we're making the videos and they're turning into a great success, and Christian's making a good job. I agreed to give him a wage, a few quid every week, just to cover his petrol and make sure that he, had a couple of bob. And the deal was that when he started to earn money from YouTube, he would have the money, which was fair enough, lovely, lovely, and off we go. So next thing you know, it turns out that I've never owned a Ferrari. I've worked on all sorts of Ferraris, including the Sterling Moss short wheelbase, which a mate of mine bought in Italy, and I worked on that for a bit. But anyway, I've never actually owned a Ferrari. And it turns out that I'd known this bloke for a number of years, and I knew he had a Ferrari. I never really talked about it because I knew I couldn't afford it. But anyway, I got a few quid and I thought, right, I'm going to ring him up and try and buy his Ferrari. So I rang him up, and fair enough, it took him a couple of days to make his mind up, but in the end he decided to sell it to me. Now, he'd removed the engine, and 20 years ago he'd had it resprayed, and it was all in pieces, but very, very well looked after in a very nice garage. So I said to Christian, right, what an opportunity. We'll go and pick it up. You can make a picture of it all dusty in the garage and looking, sad, and we'll bring it home and we'll start work on it. So anyway, we did that and it all turned out all right. Next thing you know, Christian says, well, I'm going on holiday next week. And I said, well, hang on a minute. It's not a very good week to go on holiday because we're going to get the Ferrari, we're going to take the V12 engine to bits. It's going to make a really good video. And let's face it, you're getting the money from the videos. Well, no, I'm going on holiday, so off you went. So I thought this was all rather strange. So when he came back off holiday, I said to him, really, Christian, you booked a test day at, a track day at Brands Hatch, where we were going to drive around in the Lotus 7, which would have again made a very good video. And you decided to go on holiday. So, he didn't have really an answer, and he definitely wasn't the slightest bit apologetic. But anyway, so then I said to him, have you had any money from YouTube? And he said, oh yeah, he said, I had £900 10 days ago. I said, well, I wish you'd have told me about it. But obviously he didn't tell me about it because he was going to cop the money from me, cop the money from YouTube and bugger off on holiday. So I didn't actually fall out with him, but I was criticising him, and being a public school boy, of course, you can't criticise him because he's got to be right. So anyway, he just stormed out and said, oh, well, it's not a proper job anyway, and stormed out. So now, because we've still got to do Ivan's shed, so I get in touch with him and say, right, my boy, give us all the passwords and everything, and he wouldn't give me the password. So we thought, right, well, we just call it Ivan's barn. Well, because Ivan's barn is so close to Ivan's shed that then the people all start to look at Ivan's shed. So he's copying money, which is very annoying, but, again, I wasn't particularly bothered. Anyway, so then I fronted him out and said, right, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And the last straw was he wrote me a letter offering to sell me Ivan's shed back. Well, it wasn't his to sell me, but anyway, that's what happened, and that's why we didn't have any more videos. In the meantime, along comes Josh, a young bloke I met through motor racing, and he made the couple of videos that you've seen, Ivan's barn. Anyway, we sat down and we talked about it, and me and Josh had talked about it, and he races a little MGZR, and I sort of said, well, what do you want to do? Well, what would be your ambition? And he said, well, I want to get near the front of the grid. So I said, well, why don't you pack your job up, come and work with me, we'll make a load of videos for YouTube and become an internet sensation, and you can race your car and I'll help you prepare it and get to the front of the grid. Anyway, in the meantime, we bought the MGB. and we entered it for a 3-hour race. I haven't actually got a licence this year because with COVID I didn't bother to renew it. But obviously I'm going to renew it. I'm going to have to go to the hospital this year on the running machine with the thing stuck on you, and I should do that. And then me and Josh will probably do a few long distance races in the MGB. He will race his ZR, I'm going to help him prepare it, so there'll be a lot of videos about that. In the meantime, we're rebuilding the engine on the Hall & Scott, which is, I got invited to the members meeting at Goodwood, but I didn't go because the poor old thing's been together for 4 years now, and it's such a lovely old engine, I wouldn't want to blow it up. So I said, no, we're not going to do that. We must have a look at it. So we've taken it to pieces, which you'll be very interested to see, because, you know, it is a lovely old thing with pistons so big you can't believe it, they look like dustbins. But anyway, so that is the story behind it all. So what we'd like you all to do is to come on to Shed Racing, which is what we're going to call ourselves from now on. So that it's got nothing to do with Ivan's Barn, nothing to do with Ivan's Shed, and doesn't get young Christian any more viewers, so that he can laugh up his sleeve that he had his old granddad over. But anyway, that's what we're going to do. So if you all want to come on, it's going to be Shed Racing. We're going to race the MGB. Josh is going to race his MGZR. We've got our A30, which has been sitting there for 4 years, which Kareem Shandok drove at Goodwood, so we're going to do a little bit with that. We'll do a track day or something with that. We've also got a Lotus 7, which would be quite good to do a bit of racing with. And then, of course, the Ferrari is nearly finished. The engine's all back together again. I'm now doing the interior trim and putting all the carpets back. So we'll probably do a track day with that, so you can see a V12 Ferrari being revved and driven as hard as it'll go. So there we are, that's the story. So hopefully you'll all join us and give old Christian the elbow. That would be very good from my point of view anyway. So I'm walking round the car park in Cop Hill looking at the cars, and there's this lovely little MGB, white, roof, red, looks absolutely immaculate. And I'm with Josh, and Josh said, do you know it's the Sal? And I said, really? So we started talking to the owner, who's a really nice bloke. He'd done 40 race meetings in it, and it originally had been built for Warwick Banks, and it's obviously a very good little car. Anyway, we managed to buy it off him, and I thought, well, as the new deal is going to be with Shed Racing, and we can do some long distance races with me and Josh driving the car, I thought we ought to buy it. Anyway, so we bought it. We've been testing at Silverstone for a day. Luckily we had Timothy with us, my son, and he's driven it, and he said, oh, it's not doing this and it's not doing that. So we made a few alterations to it, and by the time we left it was handling quite nicely. So anyway, this is going to be one of our cars that we're going to feature working on, obviously, and racing. So next year we'll probably do some long distance races, and hopefully we can go to Spa or somewhere like that. But anyway, this is the car. As you can hear, it makes all the right noises. The gearbox is like the worst noise you've ever heard, but it drives very nicely. It's got a proper engine that obviously costs a load of money, and the man we bought it off was called John, and unfortunately he'd had a little bit of a problem with his ticker, so he couldn't get a licence. So although he's done 40 meetings in the car, he couldn't really race it anymore, which is why he was selling it. So I bought it off him, and there we are. I think it's going to be a great success. testing the MGB at Silverstone. We had a good day really, it was all day but we didn't spend all day. The car was not turning in very well in understeering, and then it was oversteering. Never really felt right, so we thought, well, we've got to sort that out. But anyway, the reason we stopped was because the carburettors held on with studs, with Thackeray washers, and the studs had come loose in the housing and worked out, so the carburettor was flopping about. So that was one of the reasons we stopped. Prior to that, we had a misfire and the distributor was loose. So there was a few teething troubles, but we had a very good idea what to do to the car when we brought it back. So we got it back and we did a load of work on it. We messed around with the front suspension a bit and altered the rear springs slightly and a few jobs. Put the carburetor on nicely, read the ignition timing, and we had a lot of success really. Because one of the reasons I like to go testing is because young Josh is convinced that seam welding and all that nonsense is going to make him quicker. And I'm saying you don't need to go seam welding, all you need to do is go testing. Testing. Because you can make the car so much quicker by a little bit here and a little bit there. And because all the time you're driving it. And there's nothing like practice. When I was young and I raced in saloon cars, I knew Jerry Marshall very well, and I used to ring up his showroom and go, oh hello, is Jerry there? Oh no, he's testing a so-and-so. Every time he rung up, he was never there. I shouldn't think he ever got out of a racing car, so I wasn't surprised he had fabulous car control, because he was doing it virtually every day. But, when you're young and you think it can all be done in the workshop, I know it can't be done in the workshop, and testing is so important. Now the idea, obviously we ought to do a thing saying the idea of a Thackeray washer is to give it a little bit of flex, so that when the four-cylinder engine's vibrating, it don't shake the floats to bits. I mean, it's really good, it's on there. But I managed to pop it off, and because it's not red hot. So that was what we were going to use, but then the ball on there was bigger than the ball in there, so we'd have had to have modified that, which we could have done. So we went back to the box of junk and we found these lovely little metal ones, which obviously are better because they're metal, but that little clip goes like that, and it puts a little piece of metal in there, and there's no way that can come off. So the next thing, obviously, we need a bit of rod to join that together. Well, we just had a fantastic bit of luck because the original bit of rod screws into them. So in other words, we'll just take that off, we'll do away with them, we'll get that off, and then we'll use this piece of rod to go into them. And instead of having plastic, we'll have a bit of metal, which I feel a lot happier about. There, with a bit of a shove, and then you put the little clips over, and there's no way that's ever going to come off. You'd have to, I don't know what you'd have to do, but you'd have to do something a bit drastic. And then the ball out of the other one of the plastic ones is going to go in there, and clips again. I suppose the nut for that is under the bonnet somewhere. I'll tell you what that is. That's because I push the clutch bar up there, so it's a another amazing bit of luck really, although you could say it's unlucky, but we drove the car up the road, having fitted the carburettor back on. Thought, oh well, we'll just try it up the road and see that it's alright. And I drove it away, and a couple of times I changed gear, and obviously I'm not used to driving the car, and I thought, well, that's probably me. But anyway, as it turns out, it got worse and worse and worse until eventually Josh said, let's just do a standing start. So we got a lovely straight bit of road and there's no one on it, and I thought, well, we just pull up and pull it. I couldn't get it in gear. I tried everything, and in the end I had to switch the engine off, put it in gear and then start the engine, and it drove away on its own. So I said, oh, we've got a big problem here, the clutch is definitely giving trouble. Anyway, we came back, took the engine out, and the clutch thrust looked like it had been in a bonfire. So we looked at it and looked at it, and we got on the internet and saw there was a competition one, but I thought, well, you know, something that does 7,000 revs and you push the clutch out and it's got little ball bearings in it, they're not being oiled regularly, then, you know, it's got every chance of going wrong. And I'm a great believer in the old carbon thrust. So luckily we had a few old carbon thrusts knocking around, and they got, one of them was new. So anyway, we cleaned up the face of the clutch pressure plate and put a carbon thrust in. So that's what we've done. We put the carbon thrust in, blah blah blah, and it seems to be going all right. This is the bonnet which blew up at over 100 miles an hour going down the straight of Silverstone. Luckily, it only damaged the bonnet. I mean, we've actually straightened this out, believe it or not, because it was like a banana. But anyway, he managed to get back to the pits, and you'll see all this in a later video. But luckily, it didn't break the screen, it didn't break the roof, and the scrutineers allowed us to take the bonnet on and carry on for 3 hours. So in the end, it all turned out all right, except obviously we're going to have to buy a new bonnet, but that's life, isn't it? Well, we had a very good weekend at Silverstone. Josh had a good drive, Tim had a good drive, and my mate Paul had a bit of a drive. And all in all, it was a success. Although it would seem like a load of bad luck, but you know, if the cylinder head gasket hadn't have gone on the last lap of practice, it would have gone on the first lap of the race, so we had a chance to put a cylinder head gasket on it. The bonnet blew up. Well, you know, that was a very bit of bad luck, but luckily, again, Josh was very close to going off onto the pit road. So instead of having to drive all the way around with the bonnet up, which could have caused a load of aggro, he just drove off the track, and as I said before, we put the bonnet off and away he went. So we did all the 3 hours. The last lap, it ran out of petrol, which was another bad thing, but we learned a lot, you know. We're not used to doing it every 5 minutes, so we'll be a lot better next time, I can assure you. Please like and subscribe. We love to hear the comments. I love to hear the comments, and they're usually good, but you can have a go at me if you like. So that's it really. We had a good weekend.